97 years after a nuclear apocalypse, people are living in a space station known as the Ark, where there are strict rules, enforced by the counselor. Every crime is punishable by death, however underage delinquents are being kept in cells until they're 18. Clark Griffin is one of them. Though Clark is a child of officials Jake the environmental engineer of the Ark and Abigail the head of medical department, Clark who is expected to be privileged faces the same consequences as commoners after being stubborn. Clark is sketching on the floor, imagining what it's like to be on Earth with the sun on her face, trees around her, scent of wildflowers. However, she is stranded in space. 97 years have passed since a nuclear apocalypse left the planet contaminated by radiation. There were survivors. 12 nations had operational space stations in orbit at the time, but now they are clustered into one, called the Ark. It is believed that Earth will not become survivable for another 100 years, and then they can go back to it. Guards enter the room. 17-year-old Clark is in a prison cell. They stand her up and put a locking wristband on her wrist. Every crime on the Ark is punishable by death, unless you are under 18, where you just get locked up until, at 18, you are reviewed. As a guard tries to take her father's watch, Clark struggles and runs outside her cell. She looks out at tiers and tiers of cells. As the guards approach Clark, a woman comes by and tells them to stop. It's Clark's mom, Paige Turco. Clark fears she is going to be executed to preserve resources for the remaining citizens. Her mom tells her that is not true, and instead, she, and the other youthful prisoners, the 100, are being sent to the ground. A guard shoots a tranquilizer dart at Clark and she falls unconscious. A pod is launched from the Ark. Clark wakes, strapped in like the other members of the 100, some sitting, some upright. She is surprised to see Wells sitting next to her. He explains that when he found out they were going to the ground, he got himself arrested. There is turbulence. Wells says it's the atmosphere. A video comes on with the Chancellor explaining that the 100 have been given a second chance, but that the second chance is also for those left on the Ark. He tells them their slates have been wiped clean. On the Ark, the citizens demand to know what the pod was. Some yell that the 100 are just kids. Cece, speaking for the council, will not confirm or deny anything. On the pod, the Chancellor on the video explains that they are being deposited near Mount Weather, a military storage facility, built during the war, that is stocked with supplies to last 300 people up to 2 years. A boy, Finn, has unstrapped himself from his position and is doing low-G acrobatics to the amusement of the others, except Clark and Wells. The boy stops in front of Wells and says, "Check it out. Your dad floated me after all." Wells is not amused. 2 other boys have unstrapped themselves as well, and Clark urges them to reattach themselves. The pod's drag parachutes deploy and the pod's passengers are tossed about, especially those who aren't strapped in. They are thrown violently against the bulkheads, dismantling cables and conduit, resulting in blasts of steam and showers of sparks. On the Ark, it's reported that the pod is off course and in system failure. They have lost all means of communication except for the telemetry from the passengers' wristbands. The 100 are on their own. As it appears dire on the pod, Wells tells Clark he has to tell her something. She says if it's about her father, that she won't listen to whatever he has to say. The descent rockets kick in and the pod lands softly. One boy, Jasper, notices there are no machine noises, a first for all of them. The 100 unstrap themselves and move about. Finn is kneeling over one of the boys who had unstrapped himself. Clark, kneeling next to another body, asks if the boy is still breathing and Finn shakes his head. The 100 rush to the lower level where the main hatch is located. Clark rushes down and urges them to stop. The air outside may be toxic. An older boy, Bellamy, by the door reasons that if the air is toxic, they will soon be dead anyway. A girl climbing down the ladder sees the older boy and calls his name. She runs over and they hug. She asks, and he explains, he put on a guard's uniform so he could get on the pod. They reveal they are brother and sister. Someone calls out that no one on the Ark has a sibling. Someone else calls out that the girl, Octavia, was the one they found hiding underneath the floorboards in one of the resident quarters. Octavia runs to attack but Bellamy stops her. Instead, he lifts a latch and the hatch opens with a blast of steam. Everyone blinks from the bright sunlight, filtering through tall trees. Octavia takes a deep breath of the fresh air and steps out. Everyone rushes out, including Clark, who, studying a map of the terrain, determines that they landed far from Mount Weather. She looks up and sees the mountain on the near horizon. Finn comes up behind her, joking that they didn't die in a fiery explosion. She reminds him of the 2 dead boys who had followed Finn out of his seat. She then points out Mount Weather to Finn. She says it's a long, radiation-soaked forest between them and their next meal. In the control room on the Ark, an older well-coiffed man, Kane, Clark's mom, Abby, and some scientists, including Jackson, are disappointed that they have lost contact with the pod because now, they cannot determine the conditions on Earth. However, individual. Come down. Bellamy says that his people are already there, and that the people up there locked his people up, and killed his mother for the crime of having a second child, which he blames on Wells' father. Wells says his father didn't write the law, to which Bellamy retorts that here, there are no laws, and that here, they can do whatever the hell they want, which begins a chant among the 100. A thunderstorm breaks and Wells tells Bellamy they need to collect the rainwater. As the 100 dance in celebration, Bellamy replies, whatever the hell Wells wants. In the control room, they see more of the 100 dying. However, Jackson also notices that plasma osmolality is going up, so they must have found water. Kane comes in with security and they arrest Abby for overusing the allotment of anesthesia and blood on the Chancellor. She says she broke the law and used whatever it took to keep the Chancellor alive, to keep Kane from becoming Chancellor. He takes this as a confession and says he has no choice but to find her guilty. She counters that there is always a choice, like when Kane chose to press charges against her husband, resulting in his floating, and to include Clark in the charges. Kane cites Penal Code 1 and sentences her death. He whispers to her that he chooses to do anything to keep the human race alive. She counters and says she chooses to do anything to make sure the human race deserves to stay alive. Abby is put in the same cell Clark was in. She notices Clark's sketches. Clark wakes on the forest floor. The group is all asleep around her and is fascinated by the bioluminescent flowers. Finn is also awake and has gone down to the river for a canteen of water. She drinks. Finn points out a footprint of something bipedal. She says she's read nothing about bipedal animals in that area. Cece goes to Kane's quarters to plead for the life of her best friend. He says Hath's the only one who is willing to do what it takes to save humankind. Cece begs for mercy. Kane says they can't afford mercy. Bellamy wakes Wells in the middle of the night and leads him into a clearing in the forest at gunpoint. Bellamy says he isn't going to shoot him but wants the 100 to think that he has. Bellamy wonders why Wells is behaving the way he is, since his father had banished him. He encourages Wells to take off the wristband. Wells refuses and Bellamy gives a signal whereby 3 thugs grab Wells, hold him down, and force off the wristband. Abby is looking out the portal at Earth when the guards come to get her. She is dragged to an airlock. Cece hugs her. As the guards separate them, she asks Cece to watch over Clark. Abby shrugs off the guards and walks into the airlock herself. As the doors close, she tells Jackson to work with Sinclair to reverse engineer the wristbands to see if they can be used for communication. As Kane nods to Shumway, the Chancellor hobbles in and declares Abby pardoned. He tells Kane he will deal with him later and demands that Shumway open the door. Abby walks out and tells an orderly to take the Chancellor back to bed. The group has to ford a wide gap over a ravine. Finn is on a precipice, holding on to a vine and is hesitant to swing across. Jasper encourages him but notices Octavia watching them. Jasper offers to go instead and Finn hands him the vine. Jasper makes it across to the cheers of the others and finds a deteriorating sign indicating Mount Weather. A spear comes from nowhere and pierces Jasper in the chest. The group crouches for cover. Clark concludes that they are not alone.